Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and folks, I got a really special program for you. So I thought it would be a good idea to have Derek Bros of the conscienceresistance.com on, because this video is sort of taking off on a lot of different pages that, the left's trying to blame Trump, the right's trying to distance Trump from Epstein, and of course the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And Derek's been around for, I want to say, close to a decade, if not more, in the alternative media scene. TheConscienceResistance.com is his website. He's been doing great work for years and really underappreciated work in this very case. I mean, you've been on top of this. You've traveled to some of the hearings, my man. So very happy to have you on. And I want to get your take top to bottom of what we've seen happen over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you having me on, man. Thanks for the great intro. And obviously, like you said, you've been in the independent alternative media for a long time, and I've been watching your work, so happy to connect. I've been following the Epstein saga, like yourself and others, for 2, maybe 3 years. Started reporting on it in 2017 and did go to the hearing. One of the several cases, because I'm sure your audience, and as you've dissected recently, there's multiple cases going on with Epstein, and which I think is what's confusing a lot of people. Mm-hmm. There's the case with the document release. There's there's defamation lawsuits going on between Dershowitz and other people, and then there's now the new charges. So I was in Florida for one of the cases in December, and that's where I was able to get this interview with Bradley Edwards that came out in December, but all of a sudden it's circulating out again now that Epstein's in the news. And I've also produced a documentary on Jeffrey Epstein back in October of last year. So been putting in some work and trying to dissect all the different angles. I've got about 15, 16 different videos on Epstein that look at, just the different pieces of the puzzle and try to understand it and put the pieces together.
So yeah, again, were you as shocked as I was? I mean, I was with my brother. We, I had the kids in the other room. We're watching some UFC. And then all of a sudden, my phone starts popping off. Oh, my God, Jeffrey Epstein's been arrested. Like, I was pinching myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. And I'm like, man, I'm in the middle of these fights, and this is a big card, and I'm trying to have a good time, and I don't know whether I want to jump into my office and get this ready and go live. So, I did just a quick video on the information that I had. And then at 1 a.m., when we got even more, when he was arrested on the tarmac, the pictures of his home being raided, the fact it looked like they were actually going to do asset forfeiture, at least of his New York residence. These were all big things. But like you said, with those documents supposedly being unsealed, with Dershowitz maybe days earlier flipping his position, saying he wanted to keep them sealed under constitutional grounds, there was so much moving in these various cases that I did not foresee this. I mean, did you?
No, honestly, I didn't. I mean, I did a video about the release of the documents and thought that was big enough news on its own. But I'm sitting right here at my work desk and just saw the news. Somebody commented on one of my old Epstein videos on YouTube that said he's finally arrested. I'm like, that's weird. Let me just do a quick search. And then I think I jumped out of my chair and was like, holy crap. And my girlfriend was like, what's going on? What's going on? I'm like, Jeffrey Epstein just got arrested, and she's been with me to his house to film a scene for our documentary outside of his house. So she understands, how important this story is and how much I've been following it. So we were both just like, well, wait, is this really happening? So, and I'm going to be skeptical and cautious to see how things go forward. But of course, it's a big thing regardless. Just the fact that he's getting arrested. Now we'll have to wait and see how high up this really goes.
Well, absolutely. But, Jeffrey Berman, the prosecutor in this case, I read his letter on the air just before this to the judge, asking him to keep Epstein so they can't play the waiting game like they did in these civil suits. Because a lot of people have to understand, after the criminal case, it was Jeffrey Epstein during that criminal case that, on behalf of Dershowitz and others, tried to get Bradley Edwards and another lawyer disbarred. They tried to defame them. It was Bradley Edwards' countersuit that then took almost another 9 years until the day of jury selection, and I believe that's the day you were there, the day of jury selection, when he said, you know what, I call it quits, I give it in a written statement, I'm going to give some undisclosed money, and that's when Edwards and Scarola gave their press conference of 20 plus minutes, and then you asked him some pointed questions. So without further ado, I kind of want to play that clip for people, and then we can get to the Trump and presidential angles. So this is just I wish he had gotten credit in this. It does have his logo, but boy, I wish it would have been from his account.
Now, just one more question on that document, and this goes to the more salacious rumors, but I would like you to just, whatever you can say on it. Obviously, our current president has had relationships with Epstein in the past, and there are those Katie Johnson and maybe other victims who have accused Trump of being involved in things like this. In my experience, Trump supporters will not listen to anything along those lines. Obviously, we're not a court of law here right now, but are those claims of that case was dropped? It was dropped before it went to court. In your opinion, as a lawyer and your experience, is there anything you can say as to the validity of those claims, or whether or not there will be any more about that?
Nothing at all. The only thing that I can say about President Trump is that he is the only person who, in 2009, when I served a lot of subpoenas on a lot of people, or at least gave notice to some pretty connected people that I wanted to talk to them, he is the only person who picked up the phone and said, let's just talk. I'll give you as much time as you want. I'll tell you what you need to know, and was very helpful in the information that he gave, and gave no indication whatsoever that he was involved in anything untoward whatsoever, but had good information that checked out and that helped us, and that we didn't have to take a deposition of him.
That was in 2009?
That was in 2009. So,
do you know if there's any truth to James Patterson's claims that Trump kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago?
I've definitely heard that. I definitely heard that. I don't know that it was Trump himself as opposed to a manager there.
But it's Trump's club, so
yeah,
people credit him.
I've heard the rumor that Epstein was kicked out of there for allegedly trying to pick up somebody's daughter or something like that. But I think I did chase that down as far as I could, and never was able to confirm it. But I heard it.
I'm on the same boat with that. And just as far as Mar-a-Lago, that's where Virginia Roberts was kind of brought into the whole scheme, right? Via
that's
Maxwell.
where she was recruited.
Yeah, absolutely. So
all right, so there's a lot to break down there. But as you can see, Mr. Bros, he says, look, he's the one guy that called me back. And going back into some articles here, you'll see that Trump, yes, he was on the witness list. Some of this has been out there, but Bradley Edwards has never talked to anybody about it at that length. But here's the deal. We have to understand that Trump, at the very least, if you want to believe these allegations, it looks like, yes, he did travel on Epstein's plane. For instance, right here, when we have one of the assault victims, if you believe one thing, you have to believe the other. She says that, yeah, Trump did kick him out from the Mar-a-Lago resort, but I also was on the plane with Epstein and Trump on Epstein's plane. And then there is the separate allegation from the Vanity Fair article many, many years ago, right here, where Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein and somebody who was unnamed come and meet Trump and his wife Melania, and Trump says, you broke the cardinal rule, Jeffrey. Never be late for someone else's plane. So that really shows that they did travel together. Let's not get it twisted. Now, Trump has responded today, and James Patterson has responded, believe it or not. So we've got a lot to go over. Derek, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play Trump's response about Acosta and him and Epstein. Then I'm going to get your reaction on this.
Do you have full confidence in Secretary Acosta right now and in the future?
Well, you know, I met Secretary Acosta this first time I know when I made the deal to bring him on into the administration. I can tell you that for 2.5 years he's been just an excellent Secretary of Labor. He's done a fantastic job. Now, part of it is our economy is so good, our unemployment numbers are at record lows. You know, so many good things are happening. But the fact is, he's been a very good Secretary of Labor. What happened 12 or 15 years ago with respect to when he was a U.S. attorney, I think in Miami. Is it Miami?
Yes.
You know, if you go back and look at everybody else's decisions, whether it's a U.S. attorney or an assistant U.S. attorney or a judge, you go back 12 or 15 years ago or 20 years ago and look at their past decisions, I would think you'd probably find that they would wish they maybe did it a different way.
Let's stop it there. That's Trump being Trump, defending the indefensible. Let's be honest, right? Do you not agree with me there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, you know, when we put out the documentary back in October, it came out prior to the Miami Herald's excellent investigation. I do want to say the Herald did a great job, but it is frustrating. I think you can probably share this frustration that the Herald comes out of nowhere, puts out this investigation, and they keep getting the credit for breaking this story when myself and probably you and others have been talking about this for years. And I know that in our documentary, we pointed out the Alex Acosta and other details, and since then have talked about, even more. So it's a little frustrating to see that. And I just want to point this out. I'm looking at my other computer at an NBC News report from just a couple days ago. And, Trump's defending Acosta. Acosta has been taking heat separately from the Epstein thing, because they're saying, the critics are saying that under his Labor Department, he's put in charge after giving Epstein this sweetheart deal, which, by the way, he didn't just get pressured into it as he tries to claim. He met specifically with Epstein's lawyers ahead of time to craft this deal, and did so in violation of the Crime Victims' Rights Act. So now that he's Labor Secretary, which itself is a part of going after human trafficking, experts in that field are saying that his Labor Department has been far too slow to certify special visas for trafficking victims, potentially weakening protections for an already vulnerable population, among other complaints. So, just this whole idea that he's a good guy that, got pressured into by the Epstein's high-powered lawyers and he did the best he could, I don't buy it. And yeah, Trump defending that, to me, I think it goes more to Trump's character. And unfortunately, my interview, the reason it's going viral, this was back in December when it came out, and it got some attention, but I've noticed Zero Hedge and some Gateway Pundit and some other websites are using it because they believe that statement from Bradley Edwards exonerates Trump. And so now they're trying to point at my interview and see, he's the only one that responded to subpoenas. This clears him of any wrongdoing. I don't believe that. That's what Bradley Edwards said. He said Trump did respond, but that doesn't, one thing doesn't necessarily negate everything else, all the other connections that Epstein and Trump have.
Exactly. And, one of those is a financial connection in Steve Hoffenberg with Towers International. Now, Towers International is one of these Ponzi schemes where Hoffenberg takes the heat, but his right-hand man is Epstein. And then after the fact, Hoffenberg and Tower International, first of all, Tower International rehires Hoffenberg, which is unheard of after you've served prison time for a Ponzi scheme involving your own corporation, right? Then he says that Epstein's behind it, and he goes after him. There's a lawsuit there. In fact, we'll show that document right now, I believe. Let me see if I can bring that right up. This is the Ponzi scheme document. And what people don't understand is Steve Hoffenberg is the #1 super PAC donor to the Trump campaign for the 2016 election. So Hoffenberg and Trump still have a financial relationship. Trump says that he cut him off about 15 years ago, and we're going to finish this clip right now where he says it, which would make sense. Again, this is alleged to happen in the early 2000s. I would say this. I don't know that Trump himself was with anybody underage, but they both had modeling agencies. He was well aware that he was into young girls, and we all know, no matter what the spin, that Trump pays for sex. So let's stop with any other nonsense. He paid Stormy Daniels for sex. He paid other women for sex. Many people he's paid for sex have not come out. I'm not here to judge him on that. We know what we voted for, but let's let him finish up on the Epstein relationship.
I do hear that there were a lot of people involved in that decision, not just him. I can only say this from what I know, and what I do know is that he's been a really great Secretary of Labor. The rest of it we'll have to look at. We'll have to look at it very carefully. But you're talking about a long time ago. And again, it was a decision made, I think, not by him, but by a lot of people. So we're going to look at it very carefully. We'll be looking at that very carefully. Okay? Okay, anybody else?
Jeffrey Epstein is a terrific guy.
Well, I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him. I mean, people in Palm Beach knew him. He was a fixture in Palm Beach. I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan. I was not, a long time ago. I'd say maybe 15 years. I was not a fan of his. That I can tell you. I was not a fan of his. So I feel very badly, actually, for Secretary Acosta, because I've known him as being somebody that works so hard and has done such a good job. I feel very badly about that whole situation.
All right, I'm going to stop it there because that's pretty much it. Now, again, he was brave enough, Derek, to use the Epstein name in the run-up to the 2016 election and associate him with Clinton. Now, Clinton has responded and says that he knew nothing of these horrific crimes. We know about the at least 26 times on the plane. I also want to point out, A lot of people will say, well, Trump wasn't on those flight records. Well, those flight records are so incomplete. It's ridiculous. They are partial flight records to one pilot on one vehicle. In the Dershowitz testimony, I've gone over some of the stuff that's starting to get unsealed. He claims, or Bradley Edwards brings up 2 other pilots, at least another helicopter, and perhaps another helicopter, and they have none of those records. So on those records, could be a lot more people. Now,
that's an important point to make. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to say that, that's when people are there. There is, according to Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, he does talk about Trump taking a flight to New York and being on the plane at least one time. And there are, some other reports of that. But you're correct that we don't have the full record, so people need to take that into consideration. And I do think it's interesting that, so Trump commented on this today, right? And he does acknowledge that him and Epstein had a fallout. He had a clear opportunity right there to say, we had a fallout because I realized he was doing this, or because he tried to pick up a young girl at my club, which is what the story is. And that story is based on James Patterson, the author, and it hasn't checked out.
Let me stop you. Do you think that Trump, as a sitting president, could end up being a state's witness in this? It is New York. Now, and you talked about the Miami Herald, and listen, I could care less about the credit to me. A lot of my work has been seeing what even they've uncovered, and they claim that they talked to 80 of the victims, and it was 60 plus that they were allowed to report on. Some of them still didn't want to be reported on, but the Maria Farmer information. Now, this new New York stuff is 2002 to 2005. We're talking about underage minor sex trafficking. Maria Farmer was of age, but the significance of her is that she worked there from 1995 into the late 90s, claims these things were going on then, that there were young models upstairs, that Dershowitz knew Epstein back then. Dershowitz puts the time period somewhere in 98 or 99 at Les Wexner's either 58th or 59th birthday, and he claims that Lady Rothschild, I wonder why there's so many conspiracies about the Rothschilds. Lady Rothschild introduced him to Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein at the same time. Just the most bizarre stories. But in that, Dershowitz claims himself outside of the picture of the Farmer allegations. Because Maria Farmer, although of age when she was abused by Epstein and Maxwell, assaulted, if you will, in Wexner's house, she also claims to have had a 3-way with Dershowitz, with another woman, and that her younger sister was molested by Epstein. So this all occurs at the New York place, and she says she went to the FBI in the late 90s. Now, this predates all the Palm Beach stuff. So this would have been the first time that the FBI was contacted about Epstein's behavior. And now remember, none of that stuff, although people that have worked for him and have been named in civil suits now, Leslie Groff, I can't pronounce the other one's name, Sarah Kellen is another one, they seem to be the number 2, 3, 4 pimps for Epstein. Well, they worked in the same establishment. We've only got a 3-year window. Are we going to see more unsealed indictments? And could Trump actually, as a sitting president, be a witness for the state against him?
Yeah, so I'm going to respond to a couple of interesting points you made there. So I think the other co-conspirator you're referencing is Nadia Marcinkova.
Yes.
She was one of the women involved in that. So, and to the Trump thing, I want to mention, just kind of touch on the Trump stuff before you touched on Leslie Wexner. That's a really key point that people need to recognize. But Trump was accused of raping a woman, Katie Johnson, in connection with Epstein. That lawsuit came up early in the election, but then was dropped all of a sudden. And there are some kind of weird things, like Lisa Bloom, one of the attorneys representing Katie Johnson, had previously had connections to the Clintons and the Democratic Party. So some people think the whole thing was just, political maneuver. But in that case, Katie Johnson also talks about another girl who happened to be named Maria. Now, is this the same Maria who's coming forward now in the other case? I don't know. But, so we're getting more and more of these pieces of the puzzle. And journalist, researcher Wayne Madsen, I interviewed him as well at the same time that I interviewed Bradley Edwards, and you can find that on my channel. And he goes a little bit deeper into the whole Katie Johnson claims and this other girl named Maria, who was apparently also raped by Trump and Epstein. And she has been terrified to come forward because, like many of the other girls, were told by Epstein and allegedly Dershowitz and allegedly Trump that their families would be killed and that their lives would be ruined if they came forward. And so I think that's important to keep into consideration, that we might get more information as it comes to Katie Johnson, or there's the possibility that the whole thing was concocted just to try to go after Trump. But I think that there's more than a few connections that it's worth looking into. And now you mentioned Leslie Wexner. I did an interview or a video on Leslie Wexner back in February, I want to say, as part of my kind of exploring the different Epstein angles, because some people believe that Epstein is potentially a CIA or a Israeli Mossad or some type of intelligence, operative running honey traps or honeypots, and getting all these people to come to his island or to be involved in these things and then filming them. Because I'm sure you've noticed in some of the depositions and the court records, there's at least a few of the women who talk about the island being filmed and some of the interactions at the island being filmed and recorded. And there was even, this is kind of a weird detail, there was a dentist chair in Epstein's mansion in Palm Beach when it was raided. And there are some who speculate that they could have been putting like recording devices into the women's teeth, or which does exist, before they would go visit these powerful people and these connected people. So I started to explore this idea, like, okay, is there any real connection between Epstein and any intelligence agencies or anybody with the Israeli Mossad? And there's a couple things. There's Ghislaine Maxwell, her father, Robert Maxwell, who's a famous publisher who's dead now. He claims to, and there was some stories out there about him being connected to Israeli Mossad, being a British Mossad agent. But even more strong than that, I would say, is Leslie Wexner, because you mentioned the modeling companies, and this is a key component. Leslie Wexner is another older white billionaire guy who's the owner of the Limited Brands and Victoria's Secret. He also owns the Victoria's Secret fashion show. Epstein was also connected to Jean-Luc Brunel, who owns the M2 modeling agency. That guy has been accused of rape by dozens of women in the past few years. And this is the way that they recruited young girls, is that they promised them modeling jobs, or they recruited them through the modeling agencies themselves. And we know that Trump himself does have a history of being involved with pageants and things of this sort. And as Bradley Edward points out in there, Virginia Roberts was recruited from Trump's Mar-a-Lago via Epstein's co-conspirators. Now, that doesn't mean Trump knew about it, but I'm just saying there's a lot of these different connections here that I feel like, unfortunately, because of my interview in that one sentence from Bradley Edwards, some of the Trump crowd is willing to ignore at the moment.
Well, you know what? That's why I wanted to have you on, because I really wanted to go as in-depth as we could. And like I mentioned, I'm not going to play this. I'm going to do a full separate video on this one, guys. But this is Patterson on Fox News talking about it. And in this interview, he claims that nobody knew. I think that's full-on bullshit. And that neither Trump nor Clinton knew. Now, again, if you start reading some of these depositions from some of these Jane Does and some of the people, the associates, the people that worked with them, Jane Doe 43 probably has the most interesting case. Let's go to that really quickly so I can show people this. Aside from Kellen, who is it? Let's go all the way up. Aside from Kellen, Leslie Groff, and Natalia Malyshev, and of course Maxwell, when you type in butlers and go there, you'll see housekeepers, butlers, the airline pilot, various employees, assistants, associates, wittingly and unwittingly, such underlings perform their respective roles. They signed NDAs. They were told not to talk to law enforcement and push those people there. This is in one residence, all right? This is in one residence. And we've only seen glimpses into this Palm Beach, possibly New Mexico, and then London. We know that this network is actually much, much larger when we look at it. Again, they took them in from Paris, France, but Teterboro, Bangor, Stephansville, Pine Bluff, of course, the Virgin Islands, Little St. James, and now our residents on Greater St. James, Santa Fe, New Mexico, San Antonio, Texas. I mean, this is huge. Tangier, Grenada. I've seen now, I don't know if you've noticed this, Derek, but people are trying to push the idea that he's not a billionaire. Yet the mansion in New York alone has been $77 million tag on it. I don't see how this guy isn't a billionaire. We don't know how he's a billionaire. We don't know how he got that professorship. We don't know who his clients are other than Wexner. But to me, to have all those properties, to be traveling at will, to have this kind of power, how could he not be a billionaire?
Absolutely. And another interesting fact about that mansion in New York, that mansion was given to him by Leslie Wexner.
Yes.
So, again, there's another Leslie Wexner connection. And one other point I want to say on that before I forget it. So when I did that report back in February, I started to look into Wexner. And if you look up a group called the Mega Group, you can find that Leslie Wexner in the 90s co-founded this Mega Group, which is made up of a bunch of I mean, older Jewish guys. I mean, I'm not part of the whole Jewish conspiracy, but that's just the reality. These are like Steven Spielberg, Meyerhoff, Max Fisher. And then there's a name that pops up that some of you might remember. His name's Charles Bronfman, who is the father of the Seagram's heiress, who just went through the whole Nexium, sex trafficking, human trafficking trial. So again, another weird connection.
Wait a minute, Charles Bronfman? Are you sure that, because Edgar Bronfman is the father, so Charles Bronfman may be an uncle?
He may be an uncle, yeah. So what I have here is Charles Bronfman has been co-chairman of Seagram's until its merger. This is an older article I'm reading here.
It may be their brother, but I think Edgar Bronfman.
He's in the family. He's part of Seagram's, and he along with Leslie Wexner and some other Leonard Abramson. Oh, here's another one. Edgar Bronfman's also listed as well.
Yeah.
So both Edgar Bronfman and Charles Bronfman.
Because Edgar, just so everybody knows, Edgar Bronfman was actually not only the Seagram's heir, not only in the entertainment industry, not only the head of the World Jewish Congress, not only given the American Medal of Freedom by Bill Clinton, but also the mentor to Hillary Clinton as she became in the upper echelons of politics, and she actually spoke not at his wake, but his memorial service.
Yeah, there's all kinds of connections. And as far as the money goes, I think that this could lend some credibility to the whole, is Epstein some sort of, intelligence agency, what they call a NOC, a non-official undercover, which is somebody who could potentially have been hired at some point or brought in. Because that's the other thing, is Epstein has a history of working with the feds. There's the FBI report that came out over that one part that said that, Epstein had provided information, and some people think that he started working with the feds in the mid-2000s.
The Mueller document.
Even earlier than that, he came out and apparently provided them information related to financial crimes and things, back in the 90s. So, it's just a theory, but there's a possibility that at some point Epstein, who we all know is connected to all these crazy things, he starts ratting on other people to get himself some cover, starts working with the feds to some capacity, and who knows to what capacity and how deep undercover. But obviously, this is mainstream news now. You can search Epstein; it's all over the place. But as I said earlier, we've known about this. This isn't new information. For the most part, when the news is like, oh my God, this Jeffrey Epstein guy has been molesting underage girls, and there's all this crazy stuff, and it's like, yeah, we've been talking about this. This is, for anybody who looked at the documents or took some time, it's there. So it really just makes me wonder, and I think a lot of us are wondering, why now? Why is this taking place now? At the end of the day, if Epstein is brought to justice and he spends the rest of his life in prison and he brings other people down with him, I'm good with that. You know what I mean? But it will definitely be difficult to watch this. And if we start seeing, if he gets another deal, or if Epstein is the only focus, when we know there are all these other connections going on.
Well, in the original indictment, you have at least 3 employees, probably several of the names that I mentioned, who have flipped. You have 3 unknown victims. You have investigations into other crimes. When you start looking through the documents that just recently got sealed, you find out that Roberts met with the FBI in 2015 in Australia at an American consulate, meaning that they were obviously doing another investigation. I think it's great news that Bill Barr, although he recused himself from the DOJ, re-looking into the case. And by the way, when they said that they were going to stand with that decision, it wasn't because they hadn't violated the Crimes Victims' Rights Act. They absolutely violated the Crimes Victims' Rights Act, and they knew it. The problem was, when they wrote the Crimes Victims' Rights Act, they never said what the victims would be entitled to afterwards. But because there was nothing specified, if we fuck this up, there was nothing they could do. They're just like, well, I guess there's no deal to be made. And then last night, the Washington Times reported that Barr was going to recuse himself again. I wanted to throw up. I mean, that was because he worked at Kirkland and Ellis, one of the firms that had represented Epstein. He was asked about this in the confirmation hearings by Ben Sass, and he said, you can count on it. And I didn't believe him, and I was upset. But he's decided not to recuse himself this time. Jeffrey Berman is saying keep him behind bars. He wrote, I believe it was about 11 pages to Judge Pittman, why he should not be released at all, in depth, including the vehicles he owns, the properties that are registered him, etc. It was a powerful, powerful letter. We went over it here. So I got to tell you, my glass is half full today, brother. I'm hoping. Yeah. I'm hoping that they're going to roll over on some big names and some big players. Maybe one more question. Obviously the Q crowd is jumping all over this, right? And I avoid that like the plague.
Q's back.
All back in action, baby. And this is what I would say to people is real people that are trying to do good work, they put their face out there. They put their work out there. They don't work in bread crumbs and mysteries and bullshit. They don't work in decodes and donations. Well, we're going to decode this trip code. Blah, 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 blah. That's not what happens. 10 plus years ago, it was Nasara. And I didn't have to worry. Nasara was going to take care of everything. There were insiders in the government. They were ready to take out that evil Bush regime. We were going to have a constitutional republic again. How do we deal with that? I mean, how do we distance ourselves from that? But at the same time, maybe people that are on the edge, how do we bring them back into a place called reality, Derek?
So I chose to take on this little piece of the battle last year, and I have probably 3 or 4 videos that I dedicated a little bit of my time. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go down the Q rabbit hole, and I'm going to just show what I find and debunk what is obviously false. And I got a lot of hate for it, but I definitely got some folks who said, thank you. I was kind of going into there, and now I see that it's just another breadcrumb to keep me hoping that somebody's going to come save the day. And like you said, before that, there was Nasara, then you've had Benjamin Wilcock and David
Benjamin
Wilcock,
Fulford.
Benjamin Fulford.
Yes,
talking
the
about this for
Yakuza. They remember that
2
one?
decades.
Yeah, the Yakuza. The Yakuza were coming. The Yakuza Illuminati were coming to save us from the bad Illuminati. I mean, these people are, dude, I'm so glad because I forgot about that one. That must have been like 2007, 2008, right?
Yeah, they've been pushing this since the early 2000s. And that's the thing is, I know that because, politics is weird. A lot of people were awake and they were against Obama, but then we saw some people sort of go back to sleep or reveal that they didn't really care about freedom. They just wanted a Republican office and they don't care whether it's Trump or whoever else. And so the movement, if there is, or this merging of movements, has become so divided because some people think that, and I think this is going to have really interesting implications in the future of the kind of truther movements and conspiracy culture, is that there are going to be folks who look back at this time period and who really think that Trump got in and was elected by this, insider cues, and he's taken down the deep state and this and that. And then there are those of us who are just like, yeah, that was just a whole LARP, just like Fulford before that and Wilcock before that. I mean, these guys have been saying this since the early 2000s, the late 90s, the same old thing. It's about to come around the corner, the mass arrest. They're going to round everybody up. They're going to do, And so, like I said, I went down that rabbit hole to try to take an objective look and to show people like, hey, look, they say that this tweet happened at this time, but if you go check the timestamp, it's because they're in different time zones, and give logical explanations for why some of these things don't really add up. And there have been a few things where I've been like, that's a little weird, but it still doesn't prove anything. It never proved that there's this big thing going on. So all I can say is to those, and I see some in the audience, and there's some on my page as well in the last couple of days since this.
And I got nothing but love. I'm trying to bring you back.
Yeah.
We can have the conversation.
I'm not trying to down talk to anybody at all. I'm just saying, I guess for me, the reality is, and this just gets to me, the more philosophical side of the awakening that many of us are a part of or want to be a part of or have fought to be a part of. The reality is that nobody is coming to save the day. There's not going to be we have to do it. That's just it. We have to do it. We as individual people have to step up to the plate. We have to get involved in our communities. We got to spread awareness, whether that's through YouTube, passing out flyers, getting to the streets, organizing on a community level. That is when real change is going to take place, and so I've always, in addition to doing YouTube and these other things, I've always focused on what I can do down here in Houston. How can we build community here? So to me, when I hear somebody come along and says like, oh, so the aliens are about to come save the day, or Ashtar, or Q, or Benjamin Fulford, or the Dragon Illuminati, or whatever, there's always going to be somebody telling you that someone else is going to take care of it. And that makes it easy because you don't have to do anything. You can just say, okay, well, yeah, then I guess I'll just keep watching YouTube videos all day and enjoy my infotainment while they solve the problems, and I don't have to do anything. And I think that's the big dangerous thing here, is that people choose not to take action. Instead, they just watch this. And I'm sure you've seen it as much as I do, that it becomes an infotainment is, I think, the best way I've seen, or conspiratainment, where it's like, they just want to digest this material because it is salacious. It's like, oh, Trump and Epstein. It's like, we don't watch maybe, the House of Cards. We just watch the news and we get our own little fix off that. But still, if you're not moved to action, then these people are still going to be in power.
Derek,
we have to do something.
Derek, I talked to Q, okay? I was on the toilet. I got a phone call. I talked to him. When I heard that one, I mean, that was one of the many sharks that Jones had jumped over the last couple of years.
Did he claim to talk to Q?
Oh, yeah. On air.
God.
He said, I talked to Q, okay? Meanwhile, Jerome Corsi, who was his lead correspondent in D.C., is doing nightly decodes. And, folks, I'm not here to peddle bullshit. That's not why we're here. That's why we do deep dives into documents. That's why I had Derek on, because Derek is OG as it gets, man. I want to let people know about Derek. Now, it's theconsciousresistance.com, but it's also the Conscience Resistance for your YouTube page as well, Derek?
Yep, and right there on the homepage, it links to all my social media. We have a Discord channel where we chat it up and talk to people. I'm on, Steemit, DTube, all the alternative minds, all those. But yeah, YouTube, Conscious Resistance, you can find us there. And I'm putting out, I'm not nearly putting out as many as you are, man. You're killing it. But I try to put out, at least 4 to 5 a week. I'm also working on a book right now, so I've slowed down. And I do plan to be there for the Epstein trial once we get a for sure date. Once we, for those who don't know, I'm sure you've mentioned it, Thursday is the next hearing where we'll find out whether or not they're going to hold him or they're going to let him out on bail. So whenever we get an official date, I do plan to be there because I've been able to report on the Bradley Manning trial, Barrett Brown, Ross Ulbricht, Silk Road trial, a lot of other trials, and I understand the importance of independent media being there, because if you're not there to document every tedious fact that comes out, when you step outside and you go see what the mainstream's talking about, you see a 500-word article that doesn't tell you nearly, as much of what actually happened. So it's important to be there. I plan to be there. And anybody who wants to come follow or check out my work, you can visit at theconsciousresistance.com.
Well, Derek, I hope that now that we've had you on, we're going to have you on more often, at least once a month, if not more than that. Guys, like he said, I'm doing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 videos a day sometimes. This is number 3. We're definitely doing a walk and talk later on. I might even do a late night document deep dive, and I'm doing it through your support. So if you're new to this channel, now's the time to join the Burmis Brigade. Hit that subscribe button. Ring that bell for notifications. This is it, guys. I really appreciate it, and we're doing this one way. We're doing it through a GoFundMe, and thank you so much. We're about 2/3 of the way there. 2/3 of the way there. 23 days in, we're about 36.57 out of 5,000. Again, if I can make $60,000 a year, pay $20,000 in taxes, I can have a decent car. I can put these videos out 7 days a week. I can feed the kids I take care of, my sister's kids, and I can live a semi-normal life like I hope many of you are out there, not focusing on Q nonsense and conspiratard theories, but rather focusing on changing the conversation to how we can come together. Not this left-right bullshit that everybody wants to be a part of. So once again, guys, I thank you all, and I will see you on the flip side.